Is Tyler the Creator a weirdo, a rap legend, or a little bit of both? And before I could even tackle this subject matter, I had to let some time pass because some of the tweets and the things from his past resurfaced coming off the end of his tour for Chromacopia right before he dropped his dance slash party album. And that was doing really great on the airwaves. And he was doing his rounds of interviews, and he did something that he does often. I call Tyler Creator has that special snowflake syndrome real bad. And I wanted to let things die down a little bit because there was so much fodder about him and so much stuff just clogging the airways that I didn't want this video to come off like overly clout chasey, but I definitely wanted to address it in a timely fashion because I think Tyler the Creator is a good example of what it looks like when your children are not being raised with a certain sense of pride and culture and self, but most importantly, with no guidance on how to build identity. And I think that there's a larger conversation to be had around this conversation with Tyler the Creator about acceptance, and what radical acceptance and valuing of human experience really looks like underneath the Black diaspora, but the Black American umbrella specifically. And I know that Tyler the Creator doesn't come from specifically Black American heritage, but he did grow up Black in America and directly adjacent to or parallel to most of the time Black American culture. He even does a Black American sport, whether it's pop music or rap, because both come from the same place. And recently I saw a comment that furthered my thoughts on Tyler the Creator and his career and the overall impact of his music and his presence in media through the lens of his Blackness. So if this is not something you can relate to, please skip this video because I am going to be heavily focusing on Tyler the Creator through the lens of his Blackness because I feel like this is a thorn in his side. I feel like this is something that we need to candidly speak about. All right, the comment reads, I have some thoughts about this new Tyler and his newfound obsession with Black culture, or at least representing it. Somebody said, I just raised my eyebrows to drastic shifts in person, and dude did not care for the culture's approval when rapping about harming women, being obsessed with sleeping with white men, and now he's all mink mink and twerking, talking with a heavy LA accent, lol. It's like, alright, bruh. I actually don't mind Tyler at all, but I feel like Kendrick may have put a wrong size battery in his back. Now, some of this I disagree with, some of it I do agree with. And the reason why I want to dig a little bit deeper into like the trajectory of Tyler's career, because there's like some main transgressions I feel like were commonplace in his media presence that we saw change over time. And I was able to go through his albums and really make like a kind of list of like where we start to see things change. Before I jump into this, I just want to say, although Tyler has the special snowflake syndrome, he has always shown a certain level of respect and reverence for rap. And so I want to give him credit where credit is due. I think he tries to other himself from other rappers by like trying to downplay things that are like communally popular. For example, when Ebro asked him if he played basketball, like that's not just a common thing that Black men like to do to bond with one another. Or when he was asked about like, I think Scat Packs or something like that, he was like, oh, you know, I drive Alfa Romeos, like just distancing himself from things that are like commonly popular or cool at the time within the Black community to try to give itself like a special snowflake type of feel. And I think that plays into that angsty, I was alone and nobody liked me behavior when they were young, but that's a different conversation for another day. Most importantly, I want to highlight that Tyler the Creator was born on March 6, 1991. When he entered the rap game, he released Bastard on December 25th, 2009. At that time, he was 18 years old. In the current year, Tyler the Creator is 34. So 16 years he's been in the rap game. And the class that he came in with in 2009 was a lot older than him at that time. At that time, his peers and his colleagues were, you know, some almost 10 years his senior because they almost in their 40s now. And so even though he was young, that doesn't erase any of the things, but I just like to say like 16 years is a lot of time for someone to change. And if you're a consumer of his art and his music and you do find it in your heart to forgive him for a lot of these different things we're going to talk about, then by all means, because I do think 16 years is a sizable amount of time. Now, where I have issues is, and before we jump into it, my biggest issue is I just don't like the fact that Tyler, the Creator, skates over these things, and that I think a lot of artists try to like put things in their songs and their music and in their visuals, but unfortunately, with the type of harm that this perpetuates, the type of ideologies that result in real world violence that we can track through data and trend changes, that needs to be outwardly addressed. I don't want to just hear it in a rap song or see you putting a couple more black girls in your music videos. That just ain't gonna cut it for me. I think that you do need to sit down with someone that can really challenge you on these topics and subject matter, somebody that has deep and intimate knowledge and connections to the communities that you have harmed, specifically women and definitely black women and black people as a whole. And I think that these things need to be absolutely addressed. So let's start with race and colorist statements. As far back as Bastard in 2009, lyrics like, "I'll F a white bee, but I won't touch a black bee," reflect those deeply problematic rooted views when it comes to things like racism and colorism. And this was on Fish. Boppin' B on Bastard in 2009. On Goblin, he also used racial slurs for shock value, but mostly in a nihilistic and unfiltered way. When we move towards Flower Boy in 2017, we start to hear him having a lot more introspection. Like, we see him playing around with more, inspirational things along the lines of like, tell these black kids who they can be, and all these empowering messages that we start to see happening around 10 years after his first project dropped. And so Tyler's earlier work featured more internalized racism and colorism, in my opinion. I got my iPad out. Likely for shock or a lot of deflection for his own deep-seated in personal insecurities. But as he matured, we saw him leave behind those type of derogatory statements and start embracing empowering black pride messages and positive messaging. From that standpoint, if someone who consumed a lot of his interview content, I think the radical self-acceptance, the overall increase in hip-hop legends like stamping him up around that time or endorsing him in areas of the culture that I think he may have believed he didn't have access to because he was angsty and weird, like for example being like, into the fold of like fashion and like couture type of art, through his connections with people like Pharrell. And I think processing the forgiveness of his black continental African father, which was probably a big barrier of blackness for him, not having him in his life, and then possibly some resentment there towards his black mother. In his LAist interview in 2011, he stated, "I was a black skater kid. They kind of swayed away from me." And these messages I kind of like question because maybe when he was very young, but again, we got introduced to Tyler in his late teens. By then he had a full group of black skaters who also had a lot in common with him. Like, if you skate, there are other people who skate. So who swayed away from you and why? This is why I truly ask the weirdo crowd to truly challenge, what about your social engagements were having you alienated? Was it the fact that you just liked things that weren't mainstream? Because if I can remember back, we all had a little bit of an emo stage. I'm sure everybody here knew who Panic at the Disco is and My Chemical Romance and Paramore and just at least the surface level bands that were popular when we were still young and angsty. Everybody goes through that phase. So was it that you were weird or were you a weirdo? And this is why we really have to challenge these things. Okay, so in Pitchfork, and for a broader analysis of these deep-seated colorist and, racial undertones, Tyler never grew up knowing his Nigerian father. That absence became a reoccurring motif in his early work. Through the character of Dr. TC, Tyler raps about his pretty messed up life from his dad leaving him. Now, when we get into the sexual harm and assault culture, I think this is really the core of why people constantly bring these things back up, because there's just the sheer amount of misogyny and misogynoir in these lyrics. There is no way that somebody with a platform as big as Tyler, the Creator, that these things weren't causing real world harm or impacting young people's interactions with each other who consumed his music. Just as an example, we can go back to Sarah from Bastard in 2009. That includes stalkerish fantasies. We have Blow from Goblin, which presents sex in a violent and dehumanizing way, portraying women as conquest or victims. In again around 2015, 2017, again we start to see this self-reflection and desexualization. So in 2015 he begins distancing a little bit from the aggressive sexual content, and it becomes more introspective but still chaotic, and we see that around Cherry Bomb in 2015. 2017 around Flower Boy, for example, Garden Shed hints at confusion and discomfort around sexuality, so it's less exploitative and more internal. And then we get to About Igor in 2019 and Call Me If You Get Lost in 2021, where we see a lot more pain, love, and queer motifs pop up in his art, where we are able to see that he was using the shock value of misogyny and harm against women to deflect from his own inability to cope with his complex sexual identity. And again, something internal that is being impressed upon by societal norms versus, you live in LA. Find your community, living your truth for your pride. But instead, Tyler's early use of shock value misogyny eventually gave way to vulnerable, complex, often queer-centered expressions of love and heartbreak, a dramatic theme shift. So this is where I understand where that comment earlier from Instagram was coming from, because it is a dramatic change from, Golden Govers and the Kids. I can't even sing some of the songs on here, right? And to put it lightly, you was a little bit gay, Tyler, and being violent towards other people. That DA cruising, crooning culture, it made you choke, like seriously, right? Like the streets was super loud whispering about how he bippity and boppity and booed through the community once he finally came out. Like the female body obviously was the easiest punching bag for him. In that misogynistic rhetoric, while you sitting up here playing in booty with skinny white boys on some race play type timing. Like this one right here feels a little bit personal as a black woman, and then as a black person and as a woman, as a black woman, it's like, okay, colorism, I've learned to stomach, but the level of violence in Tyler's music definitely is a little bit hard looking back on, and makes me even call into question my own self, right? Like, where was I at the time consuming this type of art, right? He said once in a Fantastic Man interview in 2011, when I was 9, not being able to play it for the other kids, they were like, this shit is fucking gay. Now, I guess he's assuming being able to play his music or, show his art to other kids, and they called it gay. So again, those societal pressures or societal norms. And instead of having the guidance from his parents and his peers to be able to find his community, he instead lashed out, which I think is the experience of so many teenagers. Now let's get into the angst and the physical violence. Now again, early in his career, around Goblin, and around the Bastard release in 2009, we have songs like Yonkers, which is graphic fantasies of murder, SI, cannibalism. And this was like the introduction for like that shock rap that was going on back then, that Tumblr era. And then we have Her, which is, again, violent romantic obsession framed with stalker and killer undertones. And then we move to Wolf in 2013, where, again, this is where we start to see that shift. Somewhere between like 2013 and 2017, he had a huge change. And then we start to see this new iteration of him like really coming into full form, coming into like the COVID pandemic, right? Around like 2019, 2020. So in Wolf, he was less literal with violence, more metaphorical, and played on like motifs of emotional pain. So we had characters like Sam, Wolf, Dr. TC, and those started to really represent like mental states of anguish for him. And then later on, again, around Igor, Call Me If You Get Lost, there isn't as much violent imagery, but he still does play on the ideas of like bloodlust and lust in general to help him to identify with or to portray the different conflicts in external and internal emotional battles that he's struggling with his life. And so Tyler transitioned from outward horrorcore type of violence to more inner conflict and emotional pain, showing growth with how he channels aggression and deals with adversity. But what about all that weird shit? You know what I mean? Like, I'm very glad to see that he is starting to find fruitful ways to like mitigate some of the, anguish that he's experiencing internally. But like, what about all the weird shit you already put into the world, right? How do we help teens who may feel like a Tyler the Creator be more cognizant of how permanent some of these things are, how widespread and overarching these things can really be when they go unchecked. And now, most importantly, the last portion that I want to talk about is his own mental health, right? And in 2009, 2011, Bastard and Goblin, Tyler speaks to a fictional therapist and cries out for help. And those are usually masked as like aggressive rants. And then we see him kill off his therapist's alter ego, reflecting a more existential isolation, not wanting to work through those things. And then again, towards that 2013 and 2017 run, we see him really becoming more self-aware and introspective. He starts to really address vulnerability in the way that having an absent father is really impacting him. And then, like I said, rounding off that 2020 year coming off of Igor, we start to really see a certain level of self-acceptance and control, right? Lyrics about openness and depression. I feel like Igor was really kind of a heartbreak album for the most part. A lot of emotional honesty on that album. Call Me If You Get Lost really delved into that with like healthy detachment, ambition, clarity, having to reconcile how he grew up and the life that he lives now. Just a lot of different themes that we see changing again. So it's really easy to see through his art, which I think you could probably do for most artists, how they were growing through their own life identity and self-expression. And I think that celebrities like Tyler the Creator, who come into the game really young, are in a position to have their lives kind of on display in a way that most of us don't deal with and will likely never have to deal with. And I think if people put a microscope on who we were, because a lot of us were consuming this, a lot of us, and if it wasn't Tyler the Creator, you were likely consuming some other problematic artist like a Chris Brown, or possibly on Tumblr or Twitter back in the day, or those chat rooms, saying and doing things your ass ain't have no business saying and doing, right? Going through that angsty teenager phase in the age of technology, in the age of a technological boom and a revolution like we've never seen before, is definitely something for the history books. And I'm sure it will be in the history books. I'm sure there will be, psychological, sociological, and hell, neurological studies for decades and centuries to come on the impacts of this time period of our lives. It is just unfortunate that some young people like Tyler the Creator, their mistakes, their angsty phase, their having to grow and change and learn was definitely done on a worldwide stage. Now, does that excuse it? Again, no. There are millions of children who go through that same angsty phase. And while they may not have the most solid or thought out or, evidence-based beliefs or ideas, and sure, they may be impressionable, a lot of kids go through their lives without harming other people, without being inherently violent, without, whether with their words or their actions, try to, hurt people because they are hurt people, right? And a lot of times it's because those kids have support and guidance and a lot of the resources that it seems like kids like Tyler the Creator just didn't have. Again, from the LAist interview, he said, "Hawthorne sucks. It's a crazy place, and I'm happy that I was the weird one that got out. Whether it was the music I liked, it was different than everyone else's thought process out here. That weirdness turned me into getting out of here." And it's like, okay, but then you found a whole group of skater friends that were from essentially the same area as you. So was it that you were weird, or were you just a weirdo? Like, were you just a weirdo? Were people weird to you, or were you just weird? Because I truly find it hard to believe that you liked this music that was so avant-garde and out of this world. Like, were you listening to techno and alien outer space music? And this is where that special snowflake thing comes in. It's like, Tyler the Creator, do you think you are the first black man in the whole world that has a different taste than what would be regarded as normal? Where do you think a lot of these things even came from? If you knew your history, if you knew Black history, then you know even the more upscale things that you enjoy were likely derived from some different portion or excerpt from Black culture in the Black community as a whole. And so, like, you're not special because you drive cars that are different, or you wear different shoes, or you don't like to play basketball on the weekend with your friends. If anything, it makes you weird, and you're alienating yourself from very simple communal practices like joking around or liking everyday things and trends that come in and out of style by trying to constantly other yourself. And if this is how you behave as an adult, constantly trying to other yourself, I can only imagine how you were as a kid, constantly trying to pine for connection and attention by trying to other yourself. And other kids probably also underdeveloped with poor frontal lobe access were likely not sure how to handle that. They probably didn't have the emotional bandwidth or availability to handle a kid who was clearly going through something and needed the guidance of adults, but instead was alienating himself, likely being weird and taking it out on other people his own age, right? For example, he said, I was a black skater kid. I like fucking Good Charlotte and Kenny G, and I was black. They kind of swayed away from me. Because real shit in the black community, being different is one thing. We just have to stick together. Being different is taboo. And you know what? I want to leave space for Tyler, the Creator, and so many other people to say that, yes, I do think in the black community, we truly, truly have an issue when it comes to policing one another. I think that these systems have run so rampant and dug their hooks into each different ethnic communities so deep that sometimes we police each other in a way where it feels like you constantly have to prove that you belong. But how about this? How about we all be responsible for ourselves in a way that fosters an environment of acceptance for our kids from this moment moving forward? If you see this video, I challenge you to, instead of trying to force your beliefs or malign the young people in your lives, to do what you want them to do or say what you want them to say, or just letting them go by the wayside and not providing guidance at all, teach them their history. Teach them who they are. Keep them connected with other kids who enjoy the same things that they do. And most importantly, don't take your eyes off your kids. Because if you take your eyes off of them for too long, they may be inundated and sent down these different pipelines that will have them at the ripe age of 34 years old still being asked to atone for things that they said and did when they were a child. Because although it happened when they were young, that does not take away how impactful the things that they did really were. Now, again, just out of respect for Tyler, the Creator, before I get up out of here, I just want to give you guys some examples of times where Tyler, the Creator, did show reverence and respect for rap and hip hop. Just as a circle back to that original comment, I know that a lot of things about Tyler, the Creator have changed, but I think his love for hip hop has stayed consistent, even though he do that special snowflake thing. So his XXL conversation with Nas in 2011, Rap Radar Respect interview in 2011, his XXL fall 2021 issue, the Fly to Cloud City blog in 2011, his Audulus interview, I think that was in 2013, and his Nardwar interviews. You could really watch any of those. And those are just some early and later examples of times where Tyler, the Creator, absolutely showed hip-hop love. I think I remember him tweeting during the Jadakiss, well, let me not say Jadakiss, the Lox versus Dipset, but child, Jadakiss bodied the stage so much that it's hard to even remember anybody else was standing up there with him. And he showed so much love to Jadakiss and the way that he was able to command that stage, no background check, and just give like a raw vocal on some real MC type timing in New York City, where the birth of hip hop happened. So I have seen him definitely show love to hip hop over his career. So let's just keep that fact in order. Most importantly, my heart definitely goes out to every good kid in a mad city. You know, the ones who aren't stereotypical products of their environment. I know it can feel othering, but I think we all have a habit of sometimes alienating ourselves further from the fold than what is really being done to us because of dealing with the uncomfortable emotions alone. Dealing with them alone. So parents, please keep your eyes on your kids. Aunts and uncles, keep an eye on your nieces and nephews. And big cousins, make sure you're reaching down and making sure that all those coming up in the generations in the folds under you understand that it's okay to be different. We love you anyway. Dress the way that makes you feel good as long as age appropriate. Sing the songs that you like. What concert tickets do you want? We'll make sure you have them. We have to start supporting young people so that they don't feel like they have to navigate these uncomfortable emotions alone. Because when you leave them to do so, they end up like kids like Tyler, the Creator. I want to talk about a recent example because when I was writing the script for this video, actually Tyler, the Creator, ended up in hot water again because he posted a post that went viral with show love to D'Angelo after D'Angelo unfortunately met his passing. And his shock at his fan base's reaction to that post to D'Angelo speaks volumes to how much he's alienated himself and how far away he realizes he is now because of that behavior, because of the constant othering of himself versus dealing with the uncomfortable emotions and the truth about his lens of his own blackness, right? I think Tyler, the Creator, is also learning that much of his fan base has likely not grown with him the same way he's grown over these last 16 years. And I'm not sure what that means for his career as far as his more violent, antisocial core audience. No shade. Like, I partied with y'all and fuck with the overall vibes, but there's a lot to unpack still. And as he's unpacking those things, I'm not sure if he will alienate that fan base that keeps money in his pocket. Like, Tyler, you have made that bed, right? You not only lay in it, but I think it's brought you comfort to avoid your uncomfortable truths and to be in this, violent state of being. And in regards to legacy, I think we can just leave with the feeling of it's complicated with this matter. I think for me personally, I'm putting Tyler in the it's complicated pile. And I'm still a fan of the music. As a Black American woman, you can't ever lame shit with me. And so sometimes being so counterculture just disconnects you from your actual culture in the worst way. Tyler is the type of artist I think we just enjoy his art and perception of growth and close our ears with the rest of them goddamn interviews when he starts with that artsy fartsy shit. Because as an artsy fartsy girl, I just don't like the corny shit that Tyler be on. You sound like a loser to the crowd of people that actually give you the most legitimacy, that actually fuck with you the hard way. Like, as much as you've kind of turned your head to the side and pretended you don't have a black fan base, I just don't find that to be true, especially as a girl that grew up on the Northeast in the United States of America. Granted, it is kind of showing through his art that he's kind of grown into his blackness, and we've definitely seen him reconcile with some of those nihilistic feelings. But most importantly, don't try to delete them tweets now, bro. Like, just fucking apologize. Like, I think humans thrive in connection, and the connection you always so desperately wanted, you instead alienated yourself from. And trying to swing back the other way, baby, it's going to take more than a couple black girls shaking their ass in your music video. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I think that everybody should go look up Cross's Black Racial Identity Development Model. I'm going to actually insert it right here now that I'm talking about it a little bit, because I think it talks a little bit about how identity is developed in Western civilization for a lot of black people through the different stages of trying to withdraw from a dominant culture that consumes you but rejects you at the same time, and what that looks like amongst other oppressed people. I think it's a really interesting model to take a look at, and I'm also going to keep it on the screen while I continue to talk about it so you guys can see what I'm talking about and how it applies here. But I think that Tyler, the Creator, ultimately is just trying to build his black racial identity and align that with his actual identity, especially as a queer man in Western civilization who has a lot of money, access, and reach. Those are some heavy identifiers socially, and I think from every standpoint, from his mental health to all the things, societal impact, there's room for forgiveness for men and boys like Tyler, the Creator, but that can't come without actual changed behavior, without hard work, without, true engagement with your community in a meaningful way. I don't know what that looks like for Tyler, the Creator, but I hope he does it, and he does it soon. Because while his music will probably always sell, I don't want his legacy to be tarnished so young, right? Like 34, he still has a lot of runway in front of him for someone who's been in the game for 16 years. And just based on the music that he's putting out and the way he's still creating, he really is still getting started. And I love that for him. And I hope he doesn't shorten his own runway by not reconciling with a community that, if I'm being real with you, they're going to be the ones that's always going to keep you on. So to all the young black weirdos out there and weirdos of all ethnic communities, find your people, find your tribe. I know loneliness feels like a plague in today's society, but you are worthy of support and love and community. It's your girl, Jaleesa Marie, your favorite humanities hottie. And Tyler, the Creator, you'll probably never see this, but if you do, you were loved then and you're loved now. And I hope you come out and apologize, because if you love us back, that's what you do for someone that you love.